Let's look at Donald Trump and him setting up the election, trying to convince people that if he loses, it was because of fraud. And he's doing this mainly by saying that in-mail voting is fraudulent. Let's go ahead and watch a few videos related to this idea.
To commit to a peaceful transfer of power if he loses.
Will you commit to making sure that there is a peaceful transferal of power after the election?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. You know that I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster.
The president ramping up his claims without evidence that a surge in mail-in ballots will produce widespread fraud. The reporter emphasizing how the country is already bitterly divided.
I understand that, but people are rioting. Do you commit to making sure that there's a peaceful transferal of power?
We want to get rid of the ballots, and we'll have a very peaceful. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation.
Biden firing back overnight.
What country are we in? Look, he says the most irrational things.
Mitt Romney tweeting, fundamental to democracy is the peaceful transition of power. Without that, there is Belarus. Any suggestion that a president might not respect this constitutional guarantee is both unthinkable and unacceptable. 4 years ago, candidate Trump was asked if he would accept the results if he lost to Hillary Clinton.
What I'm saying is that I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
Well,
okay?
Chris, let me respond to that because that's horrifying.
With plans to pay his respects to the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg at the Supreme Court today, the president is tying his desire to quickly fill that seat, cementing a conservative majority, to his attacks on the integrity of the election.
Because I think this scam that the Democrats are pulling, it's a scam. The scam will be before the United States Supreme Court. And I think having a 4-4 situation is not a good situation. If you get that.
5 states with a mix of Democratic and Republican governors send ballots to all registered voters and have reported no major cases of fraud. 4 others in Washington, D.C. are planning to do the same this year due to the coronavirus. And only one, Nevada, is considered a key battleground. While Senate Republicans are prepared.
So it showed Utah. Utah is one of the most conservative states in the entire country. And Utah's been doing mail-in ballots for a while now. Understand that if it was really fraudulent, if the Democrats could rig it through that, then Utah wouldn't have a Republican-dominated legislature. Utah has a supermajority both in the state house and the state senate. They dominate most counties. There have been no reports of fraud. And so understand that these claims he's making are unsubstantiated and that he's trying to set the stage months in advance so that no matter what happens, he can try to stay in office. Him saying that there's no way that he could lose unless it's rigged, understand people would be losing their minds if Barack Obama had said this in 2012. These same Republicans who are now quiet, these same people that work for Fox, they would be losing their heads over it. They would be calling Obama, they already called him King Obama and tried to imply that he was authoritarian, but he never did anything quite like this. Even though there are faults with Obama, he was never doing something this ridiculous. Let's go ahead and watch. This is going to be PBS, and they're just talking about the validity of mail-in voting and how it can expand democracy. Let's go ahead and check that out.
6 months from Election Day, President Trump is trying to undermine a process through which millions of Americans currently cast their vote, through the mail. The practice allows voters to receive a ballot in the mail, fill it out at home, and then mail it back in or drop it off at a secure location. That, rather than going to a physical polling place and casting your vote. Absentee voting is traditionally a type of mail-in voting where you need to be approved to receive a ballot, and some states have stricter requirements than others. ProPublica's Jessica Huseman says mail-in voting has been around for a long time.
People have been voting by mail since the Civil War. We sent ballots to soldiers during the Civil War and they returned them by mail. So this is certainly not something that's new in American history, and in the last several years it's gotten even more common.
But now, given the pandemic and the risk of infection whenever people are crowded together, election officials in many states want to avoid a repeat of this, where some Wisconsin voters crowded into long lines for hours for an election in April. With growing health concerns, more than 60% of all votes cast in that state were cast by mail. That included Middleton residents Brady Minter and his wife Michelle, whose daughter Emmy has a congenital heart defect.
Anybody who's been to a voting poll knows how cramped those spaces can be. And so it was really kind of an easy decision given our personal concerns with our daughter having some heart issues. Barring any sort of unexpected events, we would do the same thing in November.
People should not have to choose between voting and preserving their good health.
But that hasn't stopped the president from lashing out at Democratic officials in Congress and in key battleground states who are trying to expand vote by mail. This while voter turnout falls amid the pandemic.
If people mail in ballots, there's a lot of illegality.
The president has accused them, with no evidence, of trying to rig the 2020 election. The president threatened to withhold federal aid from Michigan for sending out vote-by-mail applications to registered voters, and Nevada because its Republican Secretary of State sent out mail-in ballots. Both are legal in those states.
We don't want them to do mail-in ballots. We don't want anyone to do mail-in ballots.
The president himself votes with a mail-in ballot from Florida, his legal state of residence.
If you need it for some reason, or if somebody's not well, that's one thing. But when you send out 7.7 million mail-in ballots, there's forgeries.
The president's campaign against vote by mail comes as public support for it is rising amid the pandemic. In a recent PBS NewsHour NPR Marist poll, just over half of voters said they would vote by mail in November if given the option. But the partisan divide is stark. About 60% of Democrats say they would, compared to only about 40% of Republicans. 56% of Republicans say they would still vote in person.
Many people have been voting by mail for a very long time, including our military and overseas voters.
Tammy Patrick is a former elections official.
I think we get the main idea from that. So this is literally what authoritarian dictators try to do. They try to limit the amount of people that are participating in democracy. They try to limit the amount of people that are voting. The fact that Trump votes by mail himself, but he doesn't want other people to be able to do it, it just shows it's not about the actual mail-in ballots. It's the fact that he knows that a lot of the people that are going to be sending in ballots through mail are not going to vote for him. He doesn't want more democratic participation if it leads to him losing. It's the same kind of idea, like him trying to downplay the virus when he knew it was serious. It's the same kind of idea as like he's fine with people showing up to his rallies in just being packed in super tight, like not wearing masks that are indoors, but he keeps his distance far from everyone. It's those kinds of ideas that just show like he has an inflated sense of self and he doesn't really give a damn about the average person. Trust me, I'm not this hyper-partisan individual. I think George W. Bush was a war criminal, yes, but I also think that there were things that Obama did wrong, and there are things that I can be critical of with some people on the left, especially when it comes to social issues. But understand that for those that are really paying attention and those that understand how government works, it seems so obvious that Trump is a horrible leader. He's an authoritarian. Just look at the fact that there's so many people that have been in his cabinet that have now turned on him. Look at the fact that you have all these former Republican presidents and even Republican presidential nominees that aren't that supportive of him. Look at his business record. Go look at Trump University. If you just look at the consistent record of his life, it is just so obvious. And it's an embarrassment to the nation that he was ever elected.